Do you know the most desperate sound in the world? It is not a piercing scream. It is the absolute dead silence of an arrogant man when he realizes the scrap of paper he used to publicly mock me is actually a federal indictment destroying his entire tech empire. My ex-husband was 100% sure he was playing a petty family game to save $50,000, completely unaware he had just stepped onto a national security minefield. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Zoe Revenge Stories. Our channel was recently demonetized by YouTube, leaving us without the operating budget to keep running, so if you find today's story entertaining, please consider supporting us with just $1. Your generous contribution gives us the budget to pay our hardworking staff so they can cover their living expenses and continue creating these incredible stories to serve our audience. You can donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by clicking the PayPal link in the description or the comments section of this video. My name is Kayla Ray. I am 36 years old, and on this particular afternoon, I was running on nothing but stale coffee and pure adrenaline. The afternoon sun beat down on the impossibly pristine parking lot of the most exclusive private middle school in Seattle. It was a sea of shiny electric vehicles, imported European sport utility vehicles, and parents wearing designer athletic wear who looked like they had never broken a sweat in their entire lives. I, on the other hand, looked like a complete disaster. I had been awake for exactly 48 hours straight, wrestling with a highly sensitive network anomaly at my agency. My gray business suit was horribly wrinkled, my hair was tied up in a messy knot, and I was practically sprinting across the immaculate pavement to make it to my 12-year-old son Leo's science fair. I knew I was late. I also knew exactly who would be waiting to weaponize my tardiness. Sure enough, standing right by the entrance of the exhibition hall, holding a sustainably sourced organic matcha latte was my ex-husband Marcus. He was a quintessential Silicon Valley tech startup, chief executive officer complete with the mandatory black turtleneck, perfectly groomed stubble, and an insufferable habit of preaching about mindfulness while actively destroying the mental health of everyone around him. Clinging to his arm was his brand-new girlfriend, a 23-year-old fitness model, who looked like she spent her weekends meditating on luxury yachts. They presented the picture-perfect image of success and modern grace. It was entirely fake, of course, but Marcus had always been a master of optics. As soon as he spotted me rushing toward the glass doors, panting and desperate to find our son, his eyes lit up with that familiar predatory gleam. He did not step aside to let me in. Instead, he planted himself firmly in my path and made sure his voice carried across the crowded courtyard. "Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," Marcus announced loudly. Several wealthy parents turned their heads, their eyes judging my wrinkled suit and exhausted face. He was deliberately putting on a show, establishing his narrative as the devoted, reliable father while painting me as the chaotic, neglectful mother. Our final custody hearing was less than 1 month away, and Marcus was meticulously gathering his ammunition. He wanted full custody not because he actually wanted to raise a 12-year-old boy, but because paying me child support bruised his massive, fragile ego. I stopped in my tracks, taking a deep breath to steady my racing heart. "I am sorry, Marcus. I had a severe emergency situation at work. Where is Leo? I need to see his project." Marcus scoffed a short, sharp sound designed to make me feel 2 inches tall. He shook his head slowly, looking around at the other parents as if asking them to pity him for having to deal with someone as pathetic as me. "An emergency at work, right." He leaned in closer, dropping his voice just a fraction, though still loud enough for his model girlfriend and the nearby parents to hear. He twisted his face into a mocking smirk and pitched his tone to cruelly mimic mine. "You classified. You just work in the administration office, Kayla. Please stop having delusions of being some high-level spy." A few polite, suppressed chuckles rippled from the parents standing nearby. His girlfriend giggled, hiding her perfect white teeth behind a manicured hand. Then I saw him. Leo was standing just inside the lobby holding his meticulously built solar system model. His bright, eager eyes instantly dimmed when he heard his father humiliate me. His small shoulders slumped and he looked down at his sneakers. That was the fundamental truth about Marcus. He never cared about the collateral damage of his cruelty, even when that damage was his own flesh and blood. Every maternal instinct in my body screamed at me to rip Marcus apart right then and there. I wanted to wipe that arrogant smirk off his face. I wanted to tell him that my boring administration office was actually a highly secured subterranean wing of the Aegis Nexus Directorate. I wanted to scream that while he was busy pitching useless software applications to gullible venture capitalists, I was busy monitoring classified federal defense grids to keep the country safe. But I swallowed the burning anger. Arguing with him here would only create a chaotic scene, further upsetting Leo and giving Marcus exactly the kind of unhinged public reaction he desperately needed for his high-priced lawyers. I chose absolute silence. I looked at Marcus with a blank expression, absorbed the public humiliation without uttering a single syllable, and walked past him to hug my son. The bitter taste of injustice coated the back of my throat, thick and suffocating. I spent the next 2 hours admiring Leo's project, completely ignoring the whispers and the condescending glares from Marcus from across the room. I played the part of the defeated, exhausted administrative assistant perfectly. It was not until we were walking back to my car that my encrypted government pager hidden deep inside the specialized lining of my purse vibrated. It was a distinct rhythmic pulse, indicating a priority red alert. I slipped my hand into the bag, shielding the device from view, and glanced at the miniature screen. My blood ran completely cold. The highly restricted Federal Defense Network my team had been frantically monitoring for the past 48 hours had just registered a massive suspicious vulnerability breach. And the source was not a sophisticated foreign state actor. It was a localized civilian internet protocol address. The transition from the sunlit, pretentious parking lot to the subterranean climate-controlled bunker of the Aegis Nexus Directorate took less than 45 minutes, but it felt like crossing into another universe. Here there were no judging eyes or condescending whispers. The moment the biometric scanners cleared my retinas and the heavy steel blast doors slid open, I ceased to be the exhausted, disheveled mother. I was Senior Threat Analyst Ray. The operations floor was a cavernous expanse of glowing monitors bathed in a low blue light. The air hummed with the quiet intensity of 50 highly trained intelligence officers analyzing global cyber threats. I walked to the central command desk, my posture instantly straightening the wrinkling of my cheap suit, completely irrelevant in a room where raw intellect and tactical precision were the only currencies that mattered. My team looked up as I approached, waiting for my directive. This was my domain. I possessed the clearance to black out entire power grids and freeze international bank accounts with a few keystrokes. It was a staggering contrast to the woman who had just silently swallowed public humiliation to protect her child. While I was deciphering the encrypted anomaly from the localized internet protocol address, Marcus was sitting in his glass-walled penthouse office downtown, convinced he was a tactical genius. In his narcissistic mind, my silence at the school was not an act of maternal protection. It was an admission of guilt. He had convinced himself that I was hiding substantial offshore assets to bleed him dry in family court. Marcus abhorred the idea of paying me even $1,000 in child support, let alone the court-mandated amount. To a man whose entire identity was built on absolute control and financial superiority, giving money to the woman who dared to leave him was an unacceptable defeat. Determined to expose my supposed hidden wealth, he bypassed his expensive legal team and descended into the murky waters of the dark web. For a mere $5,000 paid in untraceable cryptocurrency, Marcus hired a shadow operative, a freelance cyber investigator known for stealing corporate secrets and destroying reputations. His instructions to the hacker were simple: infiltrate my personal devices, download my tax returns, and find the non-existent millions I was supposedly hoarding. Marcus's hired gun was arrogant, operating under the assumption that a mundane administrative assistant would have zero digital security. The hacker easily bypassed the superficial firewalls on my home network, feeling like a predator breaking into a fragile glass house. He navigated straight toward a folder explicitly labeled as financial records and encrypted tax returns for the past 5 years. It looked like the ultimate jackpot. He initiated the download protocol completely unaware that he had just stepped into a carefully engineered digital slaughterhouse. The file he touched was not a tax return. It was a honeypot, an incredibly sophisticated piece of decoy data designed and deployed by my specific division at Aegis Nexus. It was bait-laced with microscopic tracing algorithms and tied directly into the most restricted tiers of the Federal Defense Network. The moment the hacker attempted to extract the file, he did not just alert local law enforcement. He silently tripped the digital tripwires of the United States government. Back on the operations floor, the low hum of the room was instantly shattered. The ambient blue lighting shifted to a violent, pulsing crimson. The central overhead screens flashed with severe threat warnings. A Tier 1 breach protocol had been initiated. My division chief, a man who had not smiled in a decade, marched out of his glass office. The room fell into a hyper-focused silence as keyboards clattered furiously. We were tracing a direct aggressive intrusion into a classified defense node. The tracing algorithms embedded in the honeypot locked onto the attacker, slicing through their proxy servers and virtual private networks like a hot knife through butter. Within 90 seconds, the system triangulated the exact origin point of the hostile request. The numbers populated on the massive central screen. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the internet protocol address, my mind violently snapping the pieces together. It was not a Russian server. It was not a Chinese intelligence hub. The address resolved directly to a commercial broadband account registered to a sleek multi-story building in downtown Seattle. It was Marcus's startup headquarters. The sheer breathtaking stupidity of what my ex-husband had just done washed over me in a freezing wave. By hiring a dark web hacker to steal my personal data, Marcus had accidentally launched a cyber attack on a federal defense network. He had just elevated himself from a petty, vindictive ex-husband to a suspected domestic terrorist and corporate spy. My heart pounded against my ribs as federal investigators in black tactical gear began mobilizing across the room, securing warrants. I knew the protocol. The National Security Act mandated absolute secrecy. I could not pick up my phone. I could not send him an anonymous warning. I could not even tell my own lawyer. If I breathed a single word of this classified operation to anyone, I would face 20 years in a federal penitentiary for treason. I had to sit rigidly in my ergonomic chair, my expression completely neutral, while the unstoppable gears of the federal government began to turn. Marcus thought he was playing a clever game of three-dimensional chess to save a few bucks in family court. Instead, I had to watch in total silence as he unknowingly placed his own neck into a federal noose, preparing to be crushed by a machine he could not even begin to comprehend. Over the next 72 hours, the psychological warfare escalated heavily from Marcus's side. Completely ignorant of the massive federal surveillance net that was quietly tightening around his office building, he grew increasingly obnoxiously smug. My personal cell phone became a constant stream of cryptic, triumphant text messages. He would send things like, "I know everything about your little financial setup," and "I hope you are ready to say goodbye to Leo. The judge is going to be fascinated by your real hidden assets." He genuinely believed the stolen, encrypted decoy data his dark web hacker had downloaded was the ultimate smoking gun, the exact weapon that would utterly destroy my credibility in family court. His aggressive confidence began to seriously rattle my legal counsel. On Wednesday afternoon, my attorney called me, her voice tight with genuine professional panic. Kayla Marcus's legal team just filed an emergency motion for expedited financial discovery, she told me, the stress evident in her rushed breathing. They are demanding immediate access to all your electronic devices and bank records. His lead lawyer is acting incredibly cocky, like they are holding an unbeatable trump card. Are you absolutely certain there is nothing in your financial history they could twist against you? Did you hide $50,000 in a secondary account? If he submits evidence of financial fraud to the judge, we could lose everything, Kayla. Judges do not take kindly to hidden assets in custody battles. We need to get ahead of this right now. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping a glass of water, feeling a strange cold calm settling over my entire body. I could not tell my lawyer that the trump card Marcus thought he possessed was actually classified military code. There is no hidden money, I assured her evenly. Let them file their motions. Do not push back too hard. Let Marcus bring whatever he thinks he has to the final hearing. While my lawyer panicked, the invisible consequences of Marcus's staggering hubris began to manifest in the corporate world. It started silently. The federal government does not send a polite warning letter when they suspect a tech company of engaging in cyber espionage against the United States. Instead, federal agents quietly contact the major venture capital firms and financial institutions backing the suspect. They issue strict classified advisories about immediate national security risks. By Friday morning, the first domino fell. A massive investment group out of California, which had been poised to inject $20 million into Marcus's startup, abruptly pulled their entire funding package without a single word of explanation. By noon, his second-largest financial backer followed suit, liquidating their shares and severing all communications. Rumors started swirling in the financial district. Nobody knew exactly why Marcus was suddenly radioactive, but in the tech industry, a sudden withdrawal by Tier 1 investors is an absolute death sentence. In the span of just 8 hours, Marcus's company lost nearly 80% of its operational funding. His gleaming, highly publicized tech empire was being systematically quarantined and starved to death by an invisible hand. Naturally, Marcus's narcissistic brain could not comprehend that his own illegal actions had caused this catastrophe. He desperately needed a scapegoat, and as always, he chose me. My phone rang late Friday evening. As soon as I answered, his voice exploded through the speaker, thick with panic, paranoia, and rage. "What did you do?" he screamed, completely abandoning his usual polished, mindful persona. "Who did you talk to, Kayla? You called the investors, did you not? You are spreading malicious lies about my company to ruin my Series B funding round." "I have no idea what you are talking about, Marcus," I replied, my tone perfectly flat and indifferent. "I work in administration. I do not even know who your investors are." "Do not play stupid with me," he roared, his breathing ragged and heavy. "You are trying to bankrupt me before the custody hearing. You are a bitter, jealous woman, and I swear I will make you pay for this. I will leave you with absolutely nothing." I ended the call without uttering another word, turning off my phone entirely. The storm was gathering rapidly, but I refused to stand in the rain with him. Instead, I packed a heavy canvas duffel bag and told Leo we were going completely off the grid for the weekend. We drove 2 hours east into the rugged, pine-scented wilderness of the Cascade Mountains, leaving the digital chaos and toxicity of the city far behind us. That evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line and the mountain air turned biting cold, I sat beside Leo in the dirt, teaching him how to build a proper campfire. He was frustrated at first, his small hands trembling as the matches kept blowing out in the harsh wind. "It is not working, Mom," Leo said, looking deeply defeated. "Maybe we should just use the flashlight." "No," I said, gently guiding his hands back to the wood. "You cannot rush it, Leo. You have to build the foundation first. Dry leaves, small twigs. You give the spark exactly what it needs to catch, and then you just step back and let it breathe. Fire does the hard work for you if you set it up right." We struck the flint again. A tiny, fragile spark caught the dry moss. We leaned in, blowing softly until a sudden bright orange flame erupted, consuming the kindling and casting a warm, steady glow over my son's face. He smiled, the anxiety of the past few weeks temporarily melting away. I watched the flames dance and consume the wood, thinking about the unstoppable chain reaction currently burning Marcus's life to the ground. I did not have to strike him down. I just had to sit here in the quiet woods, protect my son, and let the fire he started consume him completely. The fire we built crackled softly under the vast star-filled canopy of the Cascade Mountains. The heavy silence of the woods was a healing balm after the sterile, high-stakes environment of the intelligence floor. I sat on a log wrapping a thick wool blanket around Leo's shoulders as he roasted a marshmallow over the glowing embers. In that quiet space, the armor I wore every single day, the cold, calculating persona of a federal threat analyst melted away. I was just a mother fiercely guarding the peace of her child. Leo pulled his stick back from the flames, blowing on the charred sugar. He stared into the fire for a long time before speaking, his voice quiet and hesitant. "Mom, Dad has been acting really strange lately." I carefully kept my expression neutral, turning to look at him. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "He is always angry," Leo explained, his gaze dropping to his boots. "But not like his normal angry. It is weird. His computer at his house keeps doing this scary thing. The screen goes completely black and then all these strange green numbers scroll down and it just shuts off entirely. It happens to his phone too. He locks himself inside his home office for hours, throwing things against the wall and screaming at people who are not even in the room with him." A sudden chill completely unrelated to the mountain wind rushed down my spine. I kept my hand steady as I stroked my son's hair, but my mind was racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. As a mother, my heart ached that Leo had to witness such chaos. But as an intelligence officer, my brain instantly decoded the reality behind Leo's innocent observation. The federal investigation was moving far faster and with a much heavier hand than I had anticipated. The system crashes Leo described were not random glitches or hardware failures. I recognized the exact signature of a remote aggressive network quarantine executed by federal cyber divisions. The intelligence task force was not merely tracking the dark web investigator Marcus had hired. They were actively sandboxing Marcus's entire digital life. They were bricking his hardware, severing his access to secure servers, and locking down his company's proprietary data under the grave suspicion of severe corporate espionage. Marcus believed he was experiencing incredibly bad luck with his technology and his investors. He had absolutely no idea that the United States government had already thrown an invisible black bag over his entire empire. By Sunday evening, the peaceful sanctuary of our camping trip was nothing but a memory. We were back in our modest suburban home in Seattle, and a torrential rainstorm was battering the Pacific Northwest. I had just tucked Leo into bed and walked downstairs into the kitchen when a violent, rhythmic pounding shook the front door. It was not a knock. It was a desperate, aggressive assault on the wood. I flipped on the porch light and peered through the peephole. Marcus was standing on my welcome mat. He was not wearing his pristine, tailored suits or his trademark black turtlenecks. He looked completely unhinged. His hair was plastered to his forehead by the freezing rain, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was clutching a thick manila folder against his chest like a life preserver. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door just a few inches, keeping my foot firmly wedged against the base of the frame. "It is nearly midnight, Marcus. Leo is sleeping. What are you doing here?" Marcus shoved his way forward, though my foot held the door steady. He shoved the damp folder through the gap, his breathing ragged and smelling faintly of expensive scotch. "I brought the paperwork, Kayla. You need to sign it right now." I glanced down at the documents. The bold lettering at the top indicated a voluntary surrender of primary custody and an agreement to legally waive 90% of my mandated child support. You are out of your mind," I said, my voice barely above a whisper to avoid waking our son. "I am giving you one last chance to walk away with some dignity," Marcus hissed, his face contorted into an ugly, desperate sneer. "I have the files, Kayla. I know exactly what you are hiding on your private servers. I have the digital footprints, the encrypted data, all of it. If you do not sign these papers tonight, I am presenting that entire file to the judge tomorrow morning at the final arbitration. I will expose your little secret to the court, and I will make sure you are criminally prosecuted for hiding assets. Sign the papers, and I will keep my mouth shut. I looked at the man I had once loved. I saw the absolute rot of his arrogance, the pathetic desperation of a narcissist who felt his control slipping and was willing to destroy the mother of his child to regain it. He truly believed the decoy data he illegally downloaded was a weapon he could use against me. He was trying to blackmail me with highly classified federal defense codes. I did not yell. I did not try to explain the unfathomable danger he was in. I felt a profound, settling calm wash over me. I looked straight into his manic, bloodshot eyes, holding his gaze until he visibly flinched. "You have no idea what you just woke up," I said quietly. Marcus stared at me for a second, then let out a harsh, mocking laugh. He shook his head, thoroughly convinced I was trying to bluff my way out of a losing hand. "You always were incredibly stubborn, Kayla. Have it your way. I will see you in court." He turned around and marched back into the pouring rain, clutching his folder of stolen government data. I closed the door, locked the deadbolt, and turned off the porch light. The trap was set, and he had just willingly locked himself inside. The final arbitration convened promptly at 9 o'clock on Monday morning. Due to severe weather that had violently battered the city over the weekend and a sudden scheduling conflict within the municipal building, the Honorable Judge Harrison had mandated the hearing be conducted via a secure video conferencing grid. I sat stiffly in the sterile, heavily air-conditioned conference room of my attorney's office, my hands folded perfectly still in my lap. I stared straight ahead at the large wall-mounted monitor. The digital video feed was split into 4 distinct rectangles. In the top left quadrant sat Judge Harrison, an austere, highly respected woman with decades of unforgiving legal experience, peering sternly over her reading glasses from her private chambers. Directly below her was my attorney maintaining a posture of calm professionalism. And taking up the entire right side of the screen was Marcus sitting shoulder to shoulder with his meticulously dressed lead counsel Richard Vance, a famously aggressive family law attorney who charged $1,000 for a single hour of his time. Marcus had clearly staged his digital background for maximum psychological dominance. He was broadcasting directly from the sleek glass-walled executive suite of his technology startup. The morning light poured in brilliantly behind him, framing him like an absolute master of the universe. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit over his signature black turtleneck, leaning back in his expensive imported leather chair, with an air of absolute untouchable triumph. Whenever the camera caught his eye, he offered a subtle, highly condescending smirk directed entirely at my video feed. He was 100% certain that this was the exact moment he would finally crush me, strip away my custody rights, and humiliate me beyond repair. Judge Harrison formally called the virtual courtroom to order, her voice echoing slightly through the speakers, and immediately granted the floor to Marcus's legal team. Richard Vance adjusted his silk tie, leaned into his high-definition microphone, and began his carefully orchestrated character assassination. "Your Honor, we are gathered here today to resolve a deeply troubling, deeply systemic pattern of parental neglect and financial deception." Richard Vance began, his voice dripping with theatrical gravity and rehearsed sorrow. "My client Marcus has consistently demonstrated himself to be a steadfast pillar of stability, providing a robust, intellectually stimulating, and nurturing environment for his son. On the contrary, the respondent Kayla has systematically prioritized a fabricated sense of professional importance over the fundamental everyday needs of her growing child. She claims to be constantly overwhelmed by a demanding career, frequently abandoning her parental duties under the convenient guise of sudden work emergencies. Yet, as our extensive investigation has thoroughly confirmed, she holds a remarkably unremarkable low-level administrative position. It is a simple, monotonous desk job, Your Honor. She files basic paperwork. She manages schedules for middle management. There are absolutely no national emergencies requiring her to abandon her 12-year-old son at public school science fairs." Marcus nodded solemnly in his video square, playing the part of the deeply concerned, long-suffering father to absolute perfection. He looked like a man who had exhausted all his patience dealing with a delusional partner. Richard Vance pressed forward, his tone growing noticeably sharper and more aggressive. But the emotional neglect is only a fraction of the deceit we are exposing today. We have compelling reason to believe, and we are completely prepared to prove to this court right now that the respondent has been deliberately and maliciously hiding substantial financial assets to fraudulently manipulate the court-ordered child support matrix. She has played a pathetic game of smoke and mirrors, crying poverty and demanding money from my client, while secretly hoarding massive funds in encrypted off-grid digital accounts. My attorney shifted uncomfortably in her seat next to me, her pen hovering nervously over her yellow legal pad. I remained absolutely motionless, my face a carefully constructed mask of stone. I did not blink. I let him talk. I let him dig the grave as deep and as wide as he possibly could. To conclusively demonstrate this egregious fraud, Richard Vance announced, his chest puffing out with supreme confidence. We are formally submitting Exhibit A into the permanent evidentiary record. This specific document was legally and independently obtained by a private investigator contracted by my client to audit the respondent's hidden digital footprint. What you are about to open, Your Honor, is the respondent's true digital access history and her heavily guarded payroll ledgers, which she painstakingly attempted to conceal behind complex military-grade encryption software. With a dramatic flourish of his computer mouse, Richard Vance uploaded the exact file Marcus had purchased from the dark web hacker into the court's highly secure digital evidence portal. A sharp notification tone dinged softly through our computer speakers, signaling that the file was now fully available for the judge to download and review. Marcus leaned forward in his leather chair, practically vibrating with toxic excitement. He shot me a look of pure venom, his eyes shining with the anticipation of my imminent destruction. He truly thought he had just dropped the ultimate guillotine blade on my neck. Judge Harrison clicked her mouse. The screen in her video feed glowed slightly brighter, illuminating her face as the submitted document opened on her secondary monitor. I watched the judge's facial expressions with forensic precision. I saw the exact defining millisecond, her mild judicial annoyance transformed into profound visceral shock. Judge Harrison was a seasoned legal veteran, a woman who had spent 30 years examining every conceivable type of corporate fraud and bitter family dispute. But as her eyes scanned the very first page of the document Marcus had so proudly and voluntarily submitted, all the blood instantly drained from her cheeks. Her jaw visibly tightened. She stopped breathing for 3 full seconds. Her eyes darted frantically back and forth across the text, absorbing the dense strings of alphanumeric tracking algorithms and the stark, uncompromising warnings regarding the Espionage Act printed clearly at the footer of the page. What Richard Vance and Marcus arrogantly believed to be a hidden payroll ledger was in stark reality a classified segment of federal defense source code. It was the digital honeypot. Even without a formalized background in cyber intelligence, anyone with a high-level government clearance or basic legal intuition would immediately recognize the glaring, indisputable watermarks embedded deeply into the header of that document. It bore the unmistakable, heavily restricted seal of the United States Department of Defense, flanked by bold, crimson lettering that classified the enclosed data as top secret and highly compartmentalized. It was not a bank statement showing $50,000 in hidden alimony. It was a digital map of the United States military defense infrastructure. "Mr. Vance," Judge Harrison said. Her voice was no longer the authoritative, measured tone of a family court mediator. It was a harsh, breathless whisper that instantly commanded absolute terror and silence. "Where exactly did your client obtain this specific digital file?" Richard Vance smiled broadly, completely oblivious to the sheer panic radiating from the judge's screen. "As I clearly stated, Your Honor, my client contracted a specialized digital investigator to bypass the respondent's fraudulent personal firewalls. My client personally secured this downloaded data to assist the court in uncovering her financial lies." Judge Harrison slowly looked up from her monitor, her eyes locking directly onto Marcus's video feed with an expression of sheer horror and disbelief. Are you stating for the record that your client paid an unauthorized third party to actively bypass a secure firewall and download this exact document onto his personal commercial servers? Yes, Your Honor. Marcus interjected loudly, entirely unable to contain his blinding pride. And as you can clearly see on your screen right now, it proves she has been lying to this court about everything. The silence that immediately followed his declaration was suffocating. It was heavy, terrifying, and absolute. My attorney, having leaned over to look at my monitor and finally realizing the unprecedented, catastrophic magnitude of what was actually happening, quickly unmuted our microphone. She spoke with a calm, chilling clarity that sliced cleanly through the digital static of the connection. Your Honor, let the official record reflect that my client Kayla will not be offering any detailed defense regarding the specific contents of Exhibit A. We absolutely cannot do so, because the document Mr. Vance has just voluntarily submitted to this court is not a financial ledger. It is classified government property. By submitting this file, opposing counsel has just formally entered indisputable self-incriminating evidence of a severe premeditated federal crime committed by his own client. Massive confusion rippled violently across Marcus's face. His smug, victorious smile faltered rapidly, replaced by an angry, defensive scowl. He aggressively leaned his face into his camera lens. That is absolutely ridiculous. She is lying again, Your Honor. Do not listen to a single word she says. That is just fake computer code she wrote to make her fake payroll look like something important. It is obvious evidence of forgery. She is trying to trick you just like she tricked me. Marcus was practically shouting now, his face flushing a deep red as he desperately tried to regain control of the crumbling narrative. He waved his hands frantically, completely blind to the fact that his high-priced lawyer had suddenly stopped moving entirely. Richard Vance was now staring intensely at his own copy of the document, his mouth hanging slightly open, his eyes wide, as he finally recognized the federal insignias he had just uploaded to a public court record. The brilliant, arrogant tech chief executive officer was still screaming into his microphone about child support and fairness, entirely unaware that the grim reaper of the federal government had already crossed his threshold. She is just an invisible nobody, Marcus shrieked at the camera, his voice cracking with a pathetic mixture of fury and uncontrollable panic. He slammed his fist down on his polished mahogany desk, pointing an accusing finger directly at his webcam. She is a glorified secretary. She sits at a desk and files paperwork. You are all being completely manipulated by a bitter, jealous woman who wants to steal my money. He took a massive, ragged breath, preparing to launch into another vicious tirade about his own victimhood. But he never got the chance to exhale. Directly behind him, the heavy frosted glass doors of his luxurious executive office were violently shoved open. The sudden explosive movement on the digital feed instantly commanded the attention of everyone in the virtual courtroom. Two large men strode purposefully into the frame. They were not wearing the casual, trendy designer clothes typical of Silicon Valley investors. They were dressed in immaculate, unforgiving black suits, with coiled communication wires snaking down their necks and hard, unyielding expressions that practically radiated federal authority. They were tactical agents dispatched directly from the Pentagon, and they moved with terrifying, highly coordinated precision. Marcus, the taller of the two agents, barked his deep voice, carrying clearly through the high-definition microphone and echoing into our secure conference room. He reached into his tailored suit jacket and produced a gold federal badge, holding it up, so both Marcus and the camera could clearly identify the seal. Federal agents, place both of your hands flat on the desk right now. Step away from the computer. Do not touch your keyboard. Do not attempt to lock your screen or delete any files. Marcus froze. The arrogant, triumphant sneer completely vanished from his face, replaced by a mask of profound, absolute bewilderment. He looked at the agents, then glared back at his monitor, genuinely believing this was some kind of elaborate prank I had orchestrated. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus demanded, his voice trembling as he tried to maintain his artificial dominance. You cannot just barge into my private office. I am in the middle of a vital legal proceeding. Did my ex-wife send you? This is harassment. I am going to sue the federal government. The agents did not engage in a debate. They did not care about his money or his corporate title. The taller agent simply stepped forward, grabbed Marcus by the shoulder of his expensive tailored suit, and forcefully spun him around. Before Marcus could utter another arrogant syllable, the agent forced his arms behind his back. The sharp metallic click of heavy handcuffs echoing through the computer speakers was the most beautiful symphony I had ever heard. Every single movement was broadcast live in brilliant high definition for Judge Harrison and myself to witness. On the other side of the digital courtroom, the sheer panic radiating from Marcus's legal counsel was palpable. Richard Vance, the high-priced attorney, who had just aggressively submitted classified military codes into a public judicial record, was physically hyperventilating. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He realized with horrifying clarity that his own client had just dragged him into a colossal national security disaster. His lucrative career was hanging by a singular fragile thread. "Your Honor," Richard Vance stammered, his face completely pale as he frantically reached for his computer mouse. "I must urgently withdraw Exhibit A. I must immediately terminate this digital feed. We have a severe, unprecedented situation." Without waiting for the judge to grant permission, the lawyer furiously clicked his mouse. The video square on the right side of the screen abruptly went entirely black, cutting off the audio of Marcus screaming as federal agents physically dragged him out of his own corporate empire. The silence that descended upon the virtual courtroom was absolute and deafening. I sat perfectly still in my chair, my breathing steady, my expression entirely neutral. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply watched as the dust settled. Judge Harrison slowly removed her reading glasses, rubbing her temples as if trying to ward off a massive headache. When she finally spoke, her voice was completely devoid of its usual measured patience. In light of the profoundly disturbing and clearly criminal developments we have just witnessed, Judge Harrison stated, her eyes locking onto my video feed with a newfound silent respect. "I am immediately granting full unrestricted physical and legal custody to the mother. Furthermore, all child support negotiations are permanently suspended, pending the federal seizure and full investigation of the respondent's financial assets. This hearing is permanently adjourned." The gavel fell, and the digital connection severed. Marcus's entire empire collapsed in a matter of hours. The irony of the situation was almost poetic. The Federal Intelligence Task Force, while thoroughly auditing his commercial servers for signs of international espionage, completely dismantled his digital life. During their exhaustive sweep, the investigators uncovered exactly what Marcus had been so desperately trying to hide from the family court. They found heavily encrypted offshore bank accounts containing hundreds of thousands of dollars meticulously hidden to avoid paying his legal obligations to his own son. By hiring a dark web hacker to find my non-existent hidden money, Marcus had handed the federal government the exact keys to uncover his own massive financial fraud. Months later, the case became legendary within the intelligence community and an absolute laughingstock in the global technology sector. The brilliant startup executive who accidentally launched a cyber attack against the United States Department of Defense just to save a few $1,000s in child support. His investors publicly denounced him. His company was immediately liquidated to pay off mounting federal fines. He was facing over 20 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary, his reputation and his freedom completely irrevocably obliterated. The sweetest victory came on a perfectly quiet Saturday morning. I was sitting on the wooden porch of our home wearing a comfortable old sweater, holding a steaming mug of hot black coffee. The crisp morning air smelled of pine trees and absolute freedom. I did not have to wear a wrinkled business suit. I did not have to absorb public humiliation to protect my family. I did not have to constantly look over my shoulder waiting for the next manipulative attack. The front door squeaked open and Leo came running out onto the porch. His eyes were incredibly bright, completely free of the anxiety that used to haunt him. In his hands, He proudly held a newly assembled, highly complex robotic arm he had spent the last 2 weeks building. "Look, Mom," Leo beamed, holding the metal contraption up to the morning sunlight. "I finally got the servo motors to sync perfectly. It works exactly like you said it would." I smiled a deep, genuine smile that reached all the way to my eyes. I pulled him into a tight hug, feeling the solid, undeniable reality of our peace. I had no burdens left to carry. I did not need to prove my intelligence, my worth, or my power to anyone in the world. The absolute sweetest revenge is never about striking back with cruelty or anger. It is about standing quietly on the high ground, protecting the ones you love with an unbreakable shield, and watching the person who tried to destroy you eagerly dig their own grave simply because they dared to underestimate the silent, terrifying greatness of a mother. Thank you so very much for taking the time to listen to my story today. I would absolutely love to know where you are listening from, so please let me know your city or country in the comments below. If you found today's story entertaining and valuable, please consider helping our channel with a small contribution of just $1. You can easily do this by scanning the PayPal QR code currently on your screen, or by using the PayPal link provided in the description box and the pinned comment below. Your generous support provides us with the vital budget to pay our hardworking staff, allowing them to feed their families and continue creating these amazing stories for you. Have a wonderful day and stay safe.